Hello and welcome to a guide for clearing the Nautiloid in a solo honor run. Now, there's an asterisk in the title because unfortunately, we do need to use a companion in order to initiate the cutscene for the ending combat of the Nautiloid. But aside from that, our companions won't deal any damage, won't heal, they won't take any aggro, and for the most part are going to simply be hidden from the enemies. And in order to do this, we are going to need us, and we are also going to need to use Mage Hand. But there's quite a bit of variety here. You can use a wizard, a sorcerer, a bard, a warlock, or just use a Githyanki. I personally prefer the wizard since it has enhanced leap and long strider. Also, we're going to probably want to pick up Toll the Dead just so that we have some necrotic damage at the beginning, which the Cambions are not resistant to, as they are resistant to most other types of damage. And it's also a fairly good idea to get something like protection from evil and good or shield of faith for us, depending on what class you're going to end up playing. So at the beginning, you're going to collect all the chests and all of the loot because you are specifically going to try to block a cultist in a doorway. And you are also really hoping for an explosive of some kind. So something like a smoke powder bomb, a candle, or an alchemist fire. If you do not get those things, you probably need to reset. You're going to skip us the first time that you come into the room because you do not want us to aggro when you kill the intellect devourer that will leave the rune slate room and enter into the cultist room. And also, you can use Shadowheart's guidance to help get us instead of just resetting there. You take the imp fight like normal, and you just have Lae'zel jump and then run away. And then once you're done with that, you go and kill the intellect devourer, and you kill the highest health cultist. Leave the lower health one alive. Then you free Shadowheart, making sure to pick up the Nautiloid tank that is closest to her. And again, you're looting absolutely everything. So if you do not find again a candle, an alchemist fire, or a smoke powder bomb, you probably need to reset. Then you go back and get us. I use Shadowheart's guidance here just because I don't want to reset, and this is more of a tutorial anyway, but you can avoid that if you would like to. Then you head back to the cultist room and you apply Longstrider to everyone, and you have Shadowheart use Arcane Trickster, and then Lae'zel will use the Githyanki racial for dexterity on herself so that she has a better stealth rating. Also, make sure to swap out Lae'zel and Shadowheart's armor here. Then Shadowheart simply goes back to the arterial mesh and just hides there, while Lae'zel and us go towards the last door over to the last piece of combat in the Nautiloid, and your player character will follow them. So your player character will then use enhanced leap on themselves, then Lae'zel, then us, then you will summon the mage hand, then Longstrider the mage hand, and maybe do a single or double dash at this point here. And then send Lae'zel, us, and your mage hand over to the door and drop off any sort of carryable items so that Lae'zel isn't contributing in combat. So this will be the Nautiloid tank that you picked up, a couple of healing potions for the mage hand to throw to us, maybe a caustic bulb or a void bulb or whatever other explosive that you may come across. And then your player character goes back to the console where you can aggro the cultists, and everybody is hiding at this point as well. And your player character will simply press the button. You should have enough movement speed at this point to get over to the rune slate room and go behind the body of the dead thrall. towards roughly the first step there. Tends to be a good spot in order to avoid any opportunity attack. You will be the only person in combat when you do this, but you also need to make sure to quickly enter turn based for Lae'zel and all the others because the mage hand and all of those buffs have a timer. So while you're in combat with the cultist, you just wait for it to run over towards you. And once it is past the door to the room, you then either leap past it or evade past it and place the chest that you have collected in the middle of the doorway in such a way. Sorry, I burped there. In such a way that that you won't be able to go to the other side, and thus neither will the cultist. However, NPCs don't always obey the laws of the game, so you need to distance yourself at least a little bit, and check the vision cone range and just end your turns until you get out of the vision cone range, and then you hide. Then Lae'zel, the mage hand, and us will enter into the last part of the Nautiloid, and you will simply have Lae'zel just try to hide because all that she was meant to do was just open the door. Us will be your main damage dealer, which is why it was really important to either give him some other defensive buffs like protection from evil and good or shield of faith. And you should normally start with the two imps as far as I'm concerned, because if the Hellbore is alive, it will simply follow you back to the point where we're going to do our cheese. But the imps can use ranged attacks, so it's not as reliable to leave them alive. Also, you want to position yourself in such a way that you are the most likely to take aggro on the enemies. So there is a potential reset here if you do not get some of the kills. But one of the other things that is extremely important is that the mage hand is going to sit in the back and carry forward any of the items. Again, just trying to make sure that Lae'zel contributes as little as possible because she could technically carry these items, but we don't want her to. So when Us starts taking out these guys, he's going to head back towards the entrance of the room because he will need to get positioned in between the cerebral aquarium and the restoration pod, which you will see that I mess up slightly. But you will also need to have your mage hand toss the explosives onto the mind flayer. We are not going to try to kill Zalk or any of the other enemies with these explosives. We simply need to kill the mind flayer. And optimally, the mind flayer will be a little bit less than, I don't know, 30 health. Roughly 25 is good. So sometimes it can actually be a bad thing if the mind flayer successfully stuns Zalk. But in this case, it all ended up working out just dandy for me. And it is imperative that you do not position any of your explosives past the center of the room, that little like circular dip, because Zalk will see that that is close enough to the mind flayer and blow them up intentionally, which he can do because his sword does fire damage. And he'll kill the mind flayer instead of you, and then you won't get any of the experience and you won't get the kill. So I just really want to make sure that I kill the mind flayer here. The next thing, though, is when all of that's done, you have your mage hand either take one of the caustic bulbs that you found or some other sort of like on the ground liquid, or you take the caustic bulb that is just to the left of Zalk and the Mind Flayer or up and to the right. I personally prefer to try to go up and to the right just because I'm scared of opportunity attacks. And once the Mind Flayer is low enough, you simply throw that caustic bulb on top of the explosive that you have, which will cause everything to ignite, which will then explode the Nautiloid tanks. So at this point, us should hopefully be able to head towards the back of the room and into the restoration pod room in between the cerebral aquarium and the restoration pod. You should probably dismiss your mage hand. The mind flayer should be dead. Lae'zel should still be in a really good hiding spot, and Zalk will then chase after us. It's also fairly likely at this point that the Cambions have spawned in. So you are then going to swap over to your player character, and while you're still in combat with the cultist, you are going to use the max range of your spells, again, preferably Toll the Dead, in order to attack these Cambions. You must never enter within 18 meters of them, and you must never go over to the yellow paint that is in front of the door to the restoration pod room, or else you will enter the crash timer combat. So, this glitch here effectively lets you attack them without ever getting in combat with them. And it's really slow. I generally prefer using karmic dice here, but you can whittle them down fairly reliably, and you can do the same thing to Zalk. So you just spend however X many turns this needs, which is like 100, and you'll get 75 XP per, including the Mind Flayer, giving 75, and you can actually level up to level 2 on the Nautiloid by doing this. So, once you have these Cambions dead, you then have a really tricky situation in which us optimally should be staying alive, because us is like maybe having somewhat of a quest later. I don't really know. But also, us is amazing at helping you kill the later 3 enemies for getting to the transponder, or my bad, that are in front of the transponder. Holy shit, I'm terrible at commentating. I'm so sorry. Anyway, the positioning that you need basically needs to exploit how limited fly is. So there are a lot of enemies in the game that can't use certain movement abilities if you are behind something, if you are line of sight of them. In a pretty common example, for instance, the Githyanki in the Kresh will not be able to use their astral step if you simply close the door, because their priority will be still to try to get to you, but because they couldn't cast the spell initially, it's like they can't cast it at all. So if us is placed properly further back than I currently have him, unfortunately, then Zalk will not be able to fly to us because the pathing will be blocked. And you'll also see that a lot of these enemies that use these movement abilities have to target uh, the players or the companions or the summons and so on and so forth, because they basically just need to target something. There aren't that many that can do it without targeting something specific. And Zalk seems to have this exact same case wherein he just can't fly to us because the pathing is blocked, and so he won't just fly close. He'll just dash. And so once we get Zalk into the appropriate part of the room, we can then do the same thing to him that we did to the Cambions. However, my us dies here because I was a little bit scared whether or not I'd be able to target Zalk without standing on the paint. And also, Zalk, for some reason, did not dash initially. Probably something weird to do with the fire that was on the ground after the explosion. So my ass died. Rest in peace. However, after this, it's completely fine. I decided that I would put a point in Rogue because this run that I'm doing, I'm going to be going mostly Rogue. And then we simply gather up Shadowheart and we put enhanced sleep on her. We do some triple dashes so that we can get towards the last couple of enemies very quickly, which we will need to do in case we do not roll high damage. And if we miss, then we use up our spell slots or whatever just to make sure that we kill these very quickly. And then we touch the transponder and we're done. So, again, with this, we haven't properly solo cleared this, but this is acting as more of a proof of concept because if you can somehow find a glitch that will skip the cutscene, then you can essentially just enter us and the mage hand into combat right off the bat. Obviously, there's the glitch that speedrunners use with jumping from about the beginning of the Nautiloid over to uh, the combat area. However, we can't really do that with us or the mage hand because us's strength is simply too low and it cannot jump that distance. So I'm hoping that somebody finds something that can make this like a proper non asterisk solo clear. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with the results of this, even though they are quite cheesy. And I hope somebody manages to iterate on it in the future. Maybe make it even cleaner, even better. Maybe rough out some of the dents that I have in this. Nonetheless, thank you for watching. Bye bye.